versus the father or mother that spends so much time with their kids, is more of that average job, but is present in their kid's life. How do you see the two splits? And I know it's not an easy answer, but is there a better way? Is one
Yeah,
better
there's a
than the
fucking
other?
better way, dude. There's always a better way than having to choose between a rock and a hard place. That's my whole commitment in life. That's literally what we stand for. If you read our website at We Are Creating, we transcend the paradigm of having to choose between financial success and spiritual, deep personal fulfillment. You could say that being with your family is that. And the better way is saying, fuck that between choosing. I'm going to have a business that produces all the financial wealth and abundance that I want. And I'm going to stop working at noon. I'm going to pick my kids up from school. You can hear my passion for this, right? This is my life.
All right, guys. So welcome to my battle plan, John. It's one of these things where I kind of look on, the internet a little bit, and I dabble and see different people that kind of, have a message that I like to share, or at least just kind of bring people on and have good conversations. And you seem like one of those people that could do that. And so I'm not really exactly sure what it was that prompted me to follow you, but you gave me a very, very good return message, and I thought it was phenomenal. Then I dug a little deeper and saw this is kind of like your thing. So
Yeah.
John, tell people kind of a little bit about who you are. I know that you're in the coaching business, and I have some quotes from you that I've took off,
Mm.
that I'm going to read, and I'm going to say, the essence of my life's work, my purpose, is to serve the one person in front of me right here and the right now, to see them fully, love them deeply, and create what they are making and having a meaningful difference in them. So tell
Yeah.
me a little bit, in our audience who's listening today, who's John?
Yeah,
Who is
man.
John
Thanks.
Patrick Morgan?
Yeah. Thanks for reading that. Yeah, that was one of those things that like it just like in a moment of kind of meditative journaling and presence with like the question is like, what are the purpose of my life? It just was like crystal clear that that's it when you boil everything down, and it always has been. It goes back to being my memory when you read that, where it starts is like being a little kid taking apart my mom and dad's VCR with a screwdriver and then putting it back together. I've always been interested in just like how things work, and then that turned inward, as I got older and started to like be aware that like, oh, my brain's a VCR, like my mind, my behavior. And I love people, I just love relationships. I love human beings. And so everybody's a VCR in that kind of way. And if I can take them apart and put them back together in a way that has the tracking work, remember that the tracking and video VHS, like, so the
Yes.
screen's clear, then I just love that. And so whether it's creating myself with clear tracking or creating another person to have clear tracking, um, that's my joy. And I call it, and there's other aspects of me too. I call it being a champion. I also have like, I just love being the absolute best that I can be. I love competition. I love winning, but not to have power over others because I'm afraid I'm not enough, but because I love pushing everybody forward. Like, let's get that tracking even clearer. Like, if I beat you, then we're both going to grow, if I can inspire you to stay engaged in that competition. And so for me, being a champion means being the best, but it also means being, in the sense of a king or queen's champion, like really being a champion for another person, really going to battle, to use the name of your podcast, for them against whatever it is in them that's getting in the way of them being their best. And so that combined with that kind of like, how does this work? How could I take it apart and put it back together? Has just driven me in everything that I've done. I had a number of different businesses prior to this personal development industry business now that I've had for 15 years. And, but at the core of all of it is conversation as the medium,
Yeah.
like dialogue between me and another person to create something in the world, in them and in the world. So yeah.
That's great. And as you're listening, John and I are in similar spaces where we're in the fulfillment business of taking somebody, who's struggling with something in the world. The line that I read earlier was actually in response to receiving spam messages on LinkedIn, which I thought was so
Mm,
cool.
mm,
And he said, maybe we're just all looking at this a different way. And you actually called that out. It's like, we're just not looking at this way. But if you take the opportunity that someone had contacted you, a marketing message that you
mm,
receive as negative and spam, as somebody trying to do something, and if you have a way to possibly help them in something you're doing, maybe you don't have to
mm,
buy with the product, but maybe you can offer a speaking gig. Example, that was
Yeah.
what you had talked about. You mentioned, this person was trying to sell me tickets to some event, and you're like, well, I should be the one speaking at that event. And I thought that was
Right.
such a unique way to think about it. Where does that come
Yeah.
from?
Well, there's two layers to it, actually, man. Thanks for calling that out. That was from a ways back. But the first layer of receiving spam is the idea that somebody out there is doing something to me. And so anybody that's getting spam in a way that it's bothering them at all is in a place of victimhood, the circumstance, and they're creating that. It's
Mhm.
like this person's doing something to me by sending this unsolicited thing. There's a whole bunch of meaning and language. And so first and foremost, I always want to be free from any of that shit. And so you could be free for it by not accommodating it, by getting a really good spam filter, or you could be free from it from not having this story that's a problem for you.
Yeah,
And that's where I began. But so once I'm free from that mattering, and what happens is then love happens, because then you suddenly look out at the world and you can see everybody's innocence. And I just saw that everybody that's sending me these messages, unsolicited quote unquote messages, which is still a victimhood frame, but it's like they're
mhm,
sending me a message, right? And I wasn't judging it, and I wasn't pissed off about it. I wasn't annoyed by it. I saw with their innocence. I was like, oh, then I could see that they're another human being trying to do something, trying to get somewhere in the world. Shit, funny that's what I hope people do. And so the second order insight, when you're free, when you're coming from a place of love, is always one of service, and it's always generative, and it's always creative. So so that came from that space, and it was the idea. So anytime I get an email from somebody now, it's not like, oh, what the hell? It's like, oh, what are they trying to do? How can I help them?
that's right.
It might not be to give them my money, but sometimes it is. Believe it or not, I've hired more people that have cold outreach to me than I think most people probably do, because I'm just open and then I listen and I'm like, this dude or this woman can actually help. And I've had some great business relationships with people that literally, you might say, spammed me.
That's funny. I like that, and it's just it's all perception, y'all. I say that we always have a story, and I'm not sure how you go about with your coaching and your clients, but I really really like to dig into a past, right? And so I want to do
Mm-hmm.
that with you a little bit today. You're living in Maui. You
Mm-hmm.
got Ohana on your hat right now for the listeners that can't see us, and that
You
means
know what that
family,
means? Oh, you do now.
right?
Awesome, man. Yeah,
My daughter
beautiful.
says that to me all the time. She watches I forget what show it was. There's like an alien that is in Hawaii. But
Awesome.
she remembers it all the time. And
Cool.
um and she says it all the time. So I so picked up right at she gonna love this episode. But where does that come from for you? Where do you derive your roots? You said Rhode Island
Mm-hmm.
really quickly before we jumped on air, is where home was. What
Mm-hmm.
talk to me a little bit
That's where
about
I
your,
grew
your
up. Yeah.
roots.
Yeah, I grew up in Rhode Island in the suburb, like place called Warwick, which is 20 minutes from Providence, the capital.
Mhm.
We had a forest in our backyard, and I would go out in the morning and play outside all day, and come in when it got dark, and I would be gone out exploring in the forest. And it was a beautiful childhood. We had a boat. I mean, I don't know if most people don't know this, but Rhode Island has more coastline than California because of all the islands. And so like the boating culture there is phenomenal. People come from around the world to sail in Newport, Rhode Island. So that was a big part of my life growing up on the water. Um, yeah. And then, I went to university in my home state, and then I studied abroad, and then it's like, wow, then the world was my oyster. And so I left in my 20s, and I've went back to visit a few times, but the rest of my life has been spread around the world. Um, so, but family, but you mentioned the word Ohana and family. I guess I'll speak to that too. Like, um, I just have always been and am still really close with both of my parents. I know how blessed I am, having worked with a lot of men and women who didn't have the upbringing that I had, to be able to have a mother that loves you unconditionally, and a father that is there to be a role model and to teach you. Like I was blessed, and I had that, and I know that those experiences are a big part of what I source from in my coaching. I've got my mother and father photos on my wall, and I have a row of some mentors on my wall in my studio here. My mom and dad are at the top. Um, not without challenges, heartbreaking when they divorced when I was 15. So, there's certainly some stuff,
Yeah.
but for the most part, I had a loving upbringing with mentorship, and so I'm just living that out now as a father myself. And so family was a big thing for me and is central in my life. And when I was walking down the street here in Maui and I saw the hat with Ohana on it, I was like, I want to keep that as close to me as I can. I've got a bracelet with my sons, Rumi and Asher's names on them. I keep them, I keep them close. And the hat's about keeping it close, but also about advertising it a little bit. It's like, hey guys, I love my family so much that I want you to know that family is a real orientation for me.
I like that. That's great, man. And what brought you to Hawaii? How did that trip take place? What in your life?
Yeah.
This whole podcast essentially, we could talk about how cool we are all we want, when we're successful in life, but I don't think that helps the general person who is likely the person that we can help. Obviously, I don't know what specific avatar you're after, but generally speaking, people have some money in a business and they're doing something and they're usually generally preoccupied with life as it's happening and not focusing on some of the things that they can. So,
Mm,
what I would say to you is give us a little history of like the up and coming you, John, and John
mm-hmm.
Patrick Morgan. And, what were things that you faced that you might have overcome? I like to see the come up stories because that's the most
Yeah.
important part of, the people that can relate to a podcast and listening as they're, listening to our words and growing. How do
Mm,
you, how do you come through the tough times? And did you have any? It sounds like you had a great
yeah.
familyhood, if you will, if that's a word. But
Yeah. Yeah.
what were your struggles?
Yeah, man. I mean, I've had, just like any entrepreneur, I've had like massive financial challenges, of course, like going completely broke and into debt and upside down and not being able to afford rent and having to house sit and live with my girlfriend's parents in my like late 20s, early 30s, which was really identity, destroying for a time and challenging. You know, all the freaking heated arguments about money and
Oh my gosh.
screaming at your wife and then realizing it has nothing to do with that. And it's just pain. That's just painful. Um, and also like I had a health thing when I was younger. I got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in my 20s, which was really fucking scary. Um, but it sent me on a path, and my mom, because she got later diagnosed as well, of just like it expanded my mind. I just started thinking, looking like, because up to that point it was like fuck Taco Bell, Coca-Cola, just like, I did martial arts, but it didn't matter what I ate because I was young. And so I thought, I was in shape, but my body was dying in a way. My immune system was being attacked by the
Yeah.
garbage that I was eating. And so as I woke up to that and started eating healthy, I mean, it expanded my whole world. And like, so it's not just about fitness to me, but it's about vitality and longevity. And I haven't had symptoms in years. And one of my doctors says that you might have just cured yourself from this disease. And so that's part of my journey as well. But as I mentioned, like the pain of my parents' separation was and continues to be, when you've got a really strong family and then they separate, it's like it's always challenging. It's still challenging,
Yeah.
at Christmas time still. Well, close with both my parents, and it's like there's the awkwardness and stuff. So yeah.
I have a similar my parents divorced when I was in my 20s. I was in college, I believe, is actually where I heard it first. And
Mm,
I actually painted that as part of an identity. And we could talk a little bit about identity too, is that I did have
mm-hmm,
parents that were together. And it was crushing to me actually when that happened.
mm,
My mom actually lives with me here in Tennessee after a divorce that she had, a
mm,
second divorce, um, kind of is what it is. But
mm-hmm,
yeah, that was something that I had some personal struggles with, and some I'm sure a lot of people, as the trend right now, there's a lot of broken homes out there. But it's how you do
mm,
with it and what you can do with the lessons learned from it. How do you feel?
sure.
You have a Are you married? You just said
I
you
am
have
married.
kids.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
because
This will
I
be
don't
my
see much of
10-year
those.
anniversary this October.
Right on.
And my son's two and my 2 and 6. I have two sons. Um, and I'm happy that I mean, I lived with the idea that I will never get married because of what's the point? I also loved meeting lots of women and loved my freedom and experience. But, it just came a point in my life where I loved my wife. And no, what it was is I wanted to have kids with my then girlfriend.
Mhm.
And for her, it was like, well, then we got to get married. And I was like, are you sure? And at the same time, I was reading Joseph Campbell's work, the mythologist, and he was the one that really showed me that marriage is an enactment of a mythology, and that there's a function to that, and it's generative, and it creates something. And I started to appreciate and understand that the living of a story for oneself and between two people is generative of something. It creates a possibility. And so I kind of fell in love with the idea of marriage, and now I fucking love it because the ultimate freedom is the discovery that this freedom the highest form of freedom is through commitment, not by avoiding it. And so it's like kind of a second order experience of freedom in my life now that I find it in commitment, as opposed to being not committed, which was when I was younger. It's a different kind of quality of freedom. So, so yeah, I love, again, back to the Ohana hat. That's, my marriage to my wife and my kids is central.
That's a great way to, put it. It's you definitely have a way of kind of like explaining, and you could tell that you have a deep sense of heart in what you do. I think it's apparent when people watch what you do. There seems like if there's a deep purpose of actually fulfilling somebody's inner something. And
Yeah.
I've been known as a little bit more cold. Although that I have my ways of getting people to move and see themselves in different ways that they've never seen them. I'm definitely a
Mm,
competitor in this to get people to an edge, and it burns me when they don't do what I'm looking for. I think you sound like you have a little bit more compassion. Where does that come from? Is that
mm.
your upbringing? Is that
I
just
think
seeing people
so.
struggle?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's going to be, who knows, right? I can make up a story, but like as I said earlier, my mom's just unconditionally loving, and she was concerned, in talking to me. As I learn now as a parent, it's good to talk to your kid about their emotions so that they find language and meaning and can
Yeah,
connect with that inside them. But like, my mom did that, I guess, intuitively or something. Like I can remember being in the rocking chair and with her saying, "How do you feel? What are you feeling?" Like, so just having that attention inwardly focused and having it be okay to speak about that, and having words and language for that, is something. And then I've continued to take apart that VCR through my life, like leading into an embodiment work in the personal development world, and going deeper and creating even more language and more internal kinesthetic awareness to be able to speak to that, and having the courage to bring it up in conversation with other people and help them to discover that, right? Like get the
yeah.
tracking clear, to use extend that metaphor again.
Do you feel the people that you work with, it sounds like they're entrepreneurs, and I kind of
Mm-hmm.
took your bio from LinkedIn, and I want to ask you about the we us.
Mm-hmm.
You have that as your bio, is there
Yeah,
identifiers,
that's my
and
pronoun.
yeah, talk to me
Yeah.
about that. But I did want to, I want to get on because you also said you talk about love, power, freedom, creating, and entrepreneurship. And
Mm-hmm.
so you definitely seem like you go in from an angle where it's like you're really trying to get deep into this people's, soul a little bit, have them feel
Mm-hmm.
something, because everyone's trying to do
Yeah.
something. Not a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
feel something. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about that whole construct.
Yeah. The we slash us is the idea that, where my website for my company is wearecreating.com, right? And so this idea that what we are is, I say, the big bang banging on. Like we are the universe expanding. It's not like, oh, the universe is like planets and then we're people. No, like literally it banged, and like here we are, and it's still expanding in the form of mimetic expression, in the form of human, procreation. That is it is the expansion of the universe. So we are that universe creating itself. And it's also a declaration. This is what we're up to. We are up to creating. And there's the we kind of is a way of relating to all of us, not as me versus you or me and you. It's just, this is just a frame. I remember hearing this once. I don't know if that it's true, but I read it somewhere, so maybe it is, that like in like the Kiwis, the natives in New Zealand, don't even have a pronoun for I. They only have we, because they always invoking their ancestors when they speak. And I just thought that was a beautiful idea. So that's the we slash us is really a way of just speaking to that in the LinkedIn thing, but it's also a little bit of a jab at the whole pronoun bullshit. Like, you got to tell me how I got to call you in order for you to be safe and okay. I see that as a form of like extreme victimhood,
Right on.
but so
I was
it's a
hoping
little
you were
bit
going
of,
to go that way because I
yeah.
wasn't sure. It sounded like you came from like just such a place of love. I was like, man, is this guy this way or is he this way? So
No,
I'm
but my
glad
love
you
has a is a look. Where is it? I'll show you what my love looks like. I had to move this because my kids. I don't know if you guys have a video, but my love is a razor sharp samurai sword, man. Like
there you go.
my love will cut like a knife, or smash like a hammer. So I have no problem with violence, and no problem with, well, I shouldn't say I have no problem with violence. I have no problem with violence, where it's in service of something beautiful, So and so, yeah, so I'm poking fun in that
Cool.
direction as well.
Good, good, good. Now this conversation got good. I'm just making sure, you always never know who someone is when they're on the other line.
Nice way to
So,
like dance into it, but I appreciate it. But yeah,
well, I wanted
cool.
to see what was going on there, and
Yeah.
there's a couple things that I'll talk about. And look, I'm the guy that I'll bring up everything anywhere. And look, if someone doesn't want to have it, then we just won't air it. I probably just don't cut things out. But
Yeah.
anyway, love, power, freedom, creating entrepreneurship. Do you feel like when you're talking to somebody and you're in the professional development space, are you feeling like they're just not getting it? And are you more, you serve men, women, both? I mean, what would be your tribe?
Well, most of the time when I'm speaking, I'm feeling like people aren't getting it. But that's because that's where I like to hang out. I pretty much only hang out with mentors, and I'll hire a coach myself if when they talk I don't get it,
Yeah.
because something that's beyond the precipice of my understanding, of my capacity to conceptualize, that's what I'm interested in. That's why I'm taking apart the fucking VCR, because like I get that I put this thing in, but how does it turn into that?
That's
What is
right.
it? How is it doing that? And sometimes it can be frustrating for people that are in my world, but that's why we take the money up front, because it's like, now you got to stick with it and you're in, and you'll get there if you stay with it. That's
That's
what
right.
I believe. You stay in a conversation where you're fucking confused and you're not getting it, then you're going to grow. I can viscerally remember what it was like when I discovered the Taoist path. My good friend James Tripp, who has been a Taoist in Tai Chi his whole life, could see in a way where paradox was obvious to him, but I was experiencing it as a dichotomy. It's either this or that, and he's like, "No, dude, it's both." And I'm like, "Fuck." Whereas now, like, I live paradox. People say to me sometimes, being coached by you is like reading the Tao Te Ching. It's like, that's because I've read it 100 times and I live it,
Yeah.
And so that's an evolution of mind that comes through hanging with that tension. So and sometimes to my detriment, because sometimes I'm speaking so far out beyond what a person's able to understand that I miss the ability to connect with them. So
Mm.
I am constantly working on how can I build that bridge, you know. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah.
We'll just have more. We'll just keep asking more.
Okay, cool.
Um,
Awesome.
but I resonate with what you kind of just said as far as like, look, it's sometimes not here nor there, right? There was a big
Mm,
event that I was at in Miami this weekend where we were actually going to be doing a pitch from the stage, or an
mm-hmm,
opportunity to offer someone to go deeper with. It's not me; it was the coach that I was working with, Coach Michael Burt, and it was gonna be like a 997 offer. We thought it, might have like $1 million take. From the event, get 1,000 people in the offer because of what we were offering was just so extreme. Didn't get a chance to put it down. There was about 8 to 12,000, or not, I don't know how many, probably 8,000 people at the venue. It was the Lone Depot Center. And a minute and 30 seconds before the stage, the organizers like, we can't do it. Something happened. We can't pitch. He was really the person who didn't want anyone to offer any services from stage. It was just kind of an event for all the agents that were there. It was an insurance. And it was a big blow because Coach Burt, myself, the team that we were working with, kind of put a lot of energy and time into this. And so he was kind of devastated a little bit after the event, and kind of just thinking about it. And I go, well, it's like that Chinese proverb, and maybe it's not Chinese proverb, I don't know what it is, but the proverb where it says, the farmer's son went out into the field, fell off the horse, broke his leg, and then he basically comes
sure.
back. All the townspeople are like, "Hey, that's so unfortunate." And the father was like, "Maybe it is, maybe it isn't." And then the army comes through the next week and tries to
Right.
recruit all the sons. And then that's so fortunate that your son broke his leg, he can't go. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't,
Mm,
right? So there's a lot of ways to see it, and I actually brought that up to those guys. I was like, well, maybe there's a better angle here, that something didn't happen for a reason, and trying to look
mm,
deeper into like the whys of many things, and trying
mm-hmm,
not to overreact. I think I was definitely in my younger years an overreactor. And
mm,
certainly the more I get into, self-development, reading much of the books, I think it gives you a whole different look on perception. So
mm.
that's great. Well, let's talk about, looking at a couple things. I pulled some lines, and I just want to see how you're going to respond to some of these. So if you're cool with pitch and catch,
Yeah, man. I don't know what that means, but throw something. We'll see what happens.
you will never earn more than your own self-worth. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I don't remember saying that, but I think it's
No, it's
true.
not.
So
It's
let's.
not. It's just,
Oh,
these
okay.
are sayings. These are sayings.
Cool. I think that's true in the sense of like, if you don't believe you're worth something, then you're going to find a way to not be able to receive it. You're going to like either not take action on the opportunity that would produce that income. You're going to have some kind of awkward state of being that's going to blow the deal. Like whatever it is, even it's not even just down to like a service business, like you pay me for this per hour. Like if I believe that I'm not worth the amazing outcome that this real estate deal looks like it's going to be for me, then you show up in a way that drops the ball. I just, I think that's a pretty awesome statement.
Yeah, there's a, as I'm podcasting, I have these notes folder, right? I think I'm sure you probably have these different
Yeah,
things and
loads
ideas
of
that you
them.
come across, and I have so many. And I was like, you know what? Let me kind of get into John because he's definitely a thinker. He thinks of
Man.
things intellectually, and I was like, let me see where he is on some of these. Here's something, and this will relate to you as a father and as well as a business owner. And I'm curious to see how you take this one. So I have the battle plan. We're like a self development. A lot of people come to me for the fitness and health side things first, just because that's what I was known for in my past. I'm obviously doing a lot more with the business development side, mental. I'm even calling myself like the mental mechanic right now. I don't even know. I'm just trying to figure out an angle that puts me in someone's mind and makes them think to go deeper, and we have a conversation. But um, one thing I brought up to my group was like, the concept is, what if my time with my kids is not what it's supposed to be? For example, like the person who works so much and
Mm,
strives so hard to make money for their family, so the generation that will have money as they're growing and aging,
hmm.
will be taken care of, versus the father or mother that spends so much time with their kids is more of that average job but is present in their kids life. How do you see the two splits? And I know it's not an easy answer, but is there a better way? Is one
Yeah,
better
there's a
than the
fucking
other?
better way, dude. There's always a better way than having to choose between a rock and a hard place. That's my whole commitment in life. That's literally what we stand for. If you read our website at We Are Creating, we transcend the paradigm of having to choose between financial success and spiritual, deep personal fulfillment. You could say that being with your family is that. And the better way is saying, fuck that between choosing. I'm going to have a business that produces all the financial wealth and abundance that I want. And I'm going to stop working at noon. I'm going to pick my kids up from school. You can hear my passion for this, right? This is my life. This is my commitment. I was doing, as when I was just a coach before I had my company, I was bringing in $500,000 a year, like, paying the taxes on that much money, net income, working 2 days a week coaching, picking my kids up from school. Like, I start my calls at 7 a.m. in Hawaii. I'm done at noon. I work out till 2, and then I pick my kids up. We go to the beach. Like, that's my life. And you don't get a life like that unless you are fucking a stand that is possible, that you can have both, because there aren't a lot of paths for how to have both. You have to forge one. And the way you forge it is to start with a commitment that I will be with my kids a substantial amount of time, and I will make all the money I want to make. You don't get that unless you stand for it. And if you buy the story that question comes from, you're fucked. You're never going to get there.
I love that answer. But let me play devil's advocate. Now the
Please
guy's
do.
got a job and he's working and he's doing something. He's maybe not as passionate as you or a female for that matter. My audience is generally male, so we're gonna just speak to the males right now. Females, if
Okay.
you're listening, thank you, but you're the very few people that listen to me, and I'm cool with that. But let's just say the income earner in the household is working,
Mm-hmm.
they're putting their time in, and they don't even have that better path. How do you get them there? What's the means? Obviously the pain's there. They want something deeper, they want something more for their life, they want more money, they want more time. How do you even get them to that step? Like, what's that process?
Well, there's two things, right? Like, is it that you want to make more money, and do you want to make more time? And you can have both, but like, let's take them one at a time. Um, you want to make more money. The real simple is you got to have more power. And when I say more power, you make more of a difference in less time. That's literally what people are paid for. It sounds like you worked on Wall Street. I have family who are fund managers, and it's like, why are they paid so much? Because of the leverage. Like,
Mm,
the impact that your decision and your research has is highly leveraged. And whether it's in a sole proprietor that's a service provider, or a fund manager, it's the same thing. Like, how can I make the biggest difference in a conversation in the shortest amount of time has been my fascination for 15 years. And that's why I get $3,000 an hour to be in conversation with the person, because of what I can do in conversation with them. So it's like, make more of a difference in less time. And how are you going to do that? Well, then we go to the other side, because the how is where the fulfillment is going to be in. So how would you love to do that? Well, I'd love to play guitar. Okay, well, cool. So what's the chances that you playing guitar is going to make the biggest difference in the smallest amount of time? Okay, maybe for you it's pretty low. It's like, well, then what else do you love to do? So let's come up with all the things that you love doing and enjoying, and let's isolate down to where you can make the biggest difference in the smallest amount of time, and let's focus in on that. And so then the next obstacle you run into with somebody who's not done what they would love for years or decades, because they believe the lie in society that you can't have your cake and eat it, which is a fucking weird statement anyway. But like, but but if you live for so long not giving yourself the freedom to do what you love, you not only don't have that in your life, but you lose the contact within to even know what it is that you do love.
Mhm.
If you don't give yourself permission to know your inner compass and then to act on it, you lose touch with it. And then people will say, well, I don't even know what I love. Well, no shit, you don't. So we got to really slow down with people and start to break them out of their ideas and start to get them in touch with at least their curiosity. And then you have to take action on that to feed your body with the knowing that it's safe and okay. And then that little voice starts to get louder and you can get more in touch with it. You can start to feel joy in what you love again, and you can start to use it to guide you and your life and your work. So that's a kind of summary, but yeah,
No, we just woken John. He's here. Welcome.
I'm
Welcome
here,
to the
man.
podcast.
I'm,
He's ready
I'm
to go.
awake. Yeah, thanks. Fired up.
I love it, man. And that's a great response and a great answer because everyone wants to basically have their cake and eat it too, as he mentioned the weird line. And I part of my framework is design a life worth living, right?
Hmm.
What's that legacy that you're trying to leave to the generation or the following generation? That's what I want to do is leave a legacy and a generational wealth to my family and to the people that
Hmm.
come up, but also not allow them just to have it. You know what I mean? Like they got to work for it. There's too many
Hmm.
people now that have the money and just give their kids blindly, and that's what makes weak society. I think we're seeing that
Hmm.
all over the place
Hmm.
right now.
Yeah.
But right on. Let me talk about our senses. Let's switch a gear here. Are you a man of faith and spirituality?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I'm not
What
a particular religion or anything like that. I mean, was raised Catholic. And then I went like full blown atheist for like a few years as I got into science. And then I started traveling and kind of found my spiritual path. And I think at this time in my life, finding even more and more faith in something greater than me being at cause in my life, in the sense of both inwardly, like a small voice that maybe in the past I might have said is my own personal intuition that's guided by my subconscious patterning and is still kind of separate. Whereas now it feels like, and I believe that this voice is coming from something beyond just this singular body.
mm,
And the messages that I get, the images through dreams, through meditative inquiry, through asking and listening, which you could call prayer, um, and also through the circumstances. Like for me, surrendering to the circumstances which have a certain resonance to them, which have a certain auspicious nature to them, which have a recurring nature to them, is following, you could say, the voice of God in the same way as I would be when I follow it within. So yeah.
right
And
on.
so there's all that, like being guided in the sense of creation, but then there's also this overarching sense of care that I'm really in touch with, that like we are all cared for, in some, in beautiful ways, and sometimes we can't understand why that care looks the way that it does, but that's an all pervading experience for me lately.
Okay. Well, I always bring up the fact that our senses are limiting.
Yeah.
Sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. Those are only so many things that we can essentially have a
Mm,
relationship with, or we could have basically an outcome after we experience one of those things. But
mm,
when I look at faith and I look at blind faith, right? You gotta, faith by itself is to believe in something that doesn't currently exist, that you can see, smell, taste, touch, hear. You have to believe in something to be true, almost like vision,
mm-hmm,
tap to something that you want. Is certain ways that I kind of look at that. If you look at these senses, wouldn't it make sense that there are things that we can't see, can't touch, can't smell,
mm,
like germs? We don't know that they're there, but they're there.
mm, mm,
The ultraviolet rays in the air, we can't see those things, but they're
mm,
there. There's smells that we don't have, hearing
mm.
sounds, pictures that we don't have. So where are you on your spiritual life as far as knowing that there's angels, demons, things of that nature? Do you believe these things exist around us? Do you believe that that is more just for the Bible people? What's your thought process there?
Yeah, I have to start at the beginning, which is, I mean, I loved that you said, it doesn't it make sense that there are things that are there that we can't sense, and it's like the idea of making sense is so deep, because even when we're trying to connect with something that's beyond our senses, we use the phrase make sense to access that, right? And so there's a certain way of being in our physical body that is a limitation to our orientation, which is what you're kind of speaking to. And I am so open to there being something other than this idea of just me in both the physical world, but also in the non-physical. Um, But what I don't have is the idea that I know what those things specifically are, and these are their actual names, because I don't believe that the names that we give anything is what anything is. It's just a label, it's just a story. Like the word truth itself actually etymologically evolved from the word tree, as in an oak tree. Tree became truth. And what is that? It's just something that's there and dependable and solid. But trees can also be cut down. And so I have a knowing that all of it is story, all of it. I'm doing a talk tomorrow for my community called At the Left Hand of God, which is about my exploration, what you call the left hand path in magic or creation, which is the path of descent into the sensory experience. It's transcendent, like basically the right-handed path, seated at the right hand of the Father, right, is the idea that if you do what is morally and ethically good, you'll be pure and you'll be welcomed into the embrace of the all of God, of union. The left-handed path is like, okay, you're going to go your own way and you're going to find God that way. You're going to go into pleasure, into pain, into the things that are socially unacceptable, and you're going to find something transcendent of all of these stories and meaning, and you're going to meet the divine that way. And so I've been in the last year or two exploring that path, involving also the use of psychedelics. And so for me, when I have an experience that is not the normal experience, whether it's through meditative practice or induced through psychedelics, and all of this sensory experience melts away, only thing you're left with is the possibility that that's something beyond, because I'm the eye that, there's still something here. And this idea of vision or touch is no longer as relevant because I'm touching something that isn't actually there, or is it, So,
Right.
yeah.
I was in a Bible study. So I'm a Catholic. I grew up Catholic, but I'm a Christian. I
Hmm.
was reborn, but there was a period in my life also that I went to college, and we had to take a religion course in college. I went to Sacred Heart University up in Connecticut, and they make you take Religion 101. And after doing
Hmm.
so, I really kind of just been exposed to the other religions, and I was like, man, why is mine better than anyone else's?
Mm.
Why? And I hated the fact that Catholic priests can't, have relations, with, women and stuff. So I was really having a hard time understanding that, and I kind of walked away from the church for a while and went into more like Craigism. Do
Mm.
to others what you want done to yourself, which is the basic
Hmm.
principles of religion anyway. And when it's all broken down to kind of some constructs, and kind of really got into it, later in life after having my daughter. There was a client that had exposed me to a message, and I'll do an episode on this for whoever's listening at some point, of my walk into religion once again.
Mm.
But uh, 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 about a month ago, we were sitting in a Bible study with a bunch of guys, and we talked about, like, what is your being? What is
Mm.
your thoughts? Those things that are inside of you. Do they
Hmm.
go? Do that? You can't touch, taste, smell, see them. So that thing, where does it even live? What part
Mm.
of your body is it in? Everyone thinks it's here, but is it not? They say the stomach is your
Mm.
second brain. So that's an interesting concept when you're looking at, like, your thoughts, your anxieties, the stresses, your visions, the thing you think about. Those don't have any clues to, like, what where our senses are, because those are things that
Mm.
we're internalizing ourselves, and we're having a demonstrated capacity to feel a certain way around those, where you could feel one way and I could feel another way.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so it's very interesting to see how we are affected, psychologically, by those things, etc. But it's just a concept I kind of want to just run by you, as far as, like, your being. What is that to you when you hear the word your being?
Mm.
That thing, and that could possibly pass when you leave. What does that mean
Hmm.
to you?
Yeah, well, I have two definitions of the word being, because I think there's two that are used out there, and I kind of distinguish them. I say, like, uppercase being is like the presence that is transcendent of story and meaning and even humanness. It's like that oneness experience that you have when you're in a deep meditation, that oneness experience that you have when everybody in the Catholic Church is singing, and there's a real presence of Holy Spirit, right? Like that's something beyond the stories about me, my memories, meaning. That's like all uppercase being. And then there's being in what I would call the Heideggerian sense, to reference the philosopher Martin Heidegger, which is to say, being is the house of language. I would say that's an uppercase B, just being. And so is this thing being a coffee mug that I'm holding in my hand, or is it being a thrown object when I smash it against the wall? Well,
Mm,
it
mm,
depends on what story that I'm telling and what's happening. Heidegger says a hammer isn't being a hammer that's hanging on the wall in the tool shed unless there's a human out there focused on it or using it.
mhm.
Otherwise, it's just unnamed. It's just something there. And so for me, actually, I'm distinguishing kind of the way that you were talking about being. I think you were invoking both in the same definition. And for me, that distinction is really important, to go beyond like the labels is the being that for me is holy and spiritual. And then the other aspect of being. So to bring it back to myself, what is my being? Well, my being is our being. That goes back to the we us pronoun, right? Like in the all uppercase being, and it just is. And it becomes hard to even use language to talk about it. We can signpost towards it, but then language gives up or has to give up. But then there's the other side of it, like, who am I being today? Am I being a kind and loving man? Am I being free? Am I being powerful? Or am I being kind of a passive aggressive dick with my wife? Like, who am I being? And everything in between and all other sorts of things. And being is actually very central to our work as well. And so both the all uppercase being and helping a person be free and connected to a source of love, you could call it God. We have a lot of clients that call it God and relate to it that way. And I'm not so hung up on which language a person uses. And then, like, cool, now bring it back down to earth as that love, as God. What and who are you being in the world of form? Are you being, I am a valuable person? Cool. Are you being that I have specific monetary value in the way that I do this service? Even better. That's going to be more likely to produce a material outcome. So like, we help people to really cultivate a conscious way of being in the world that produces what they want. So for us, being is the bridge between the spiritual and the material.
I like that. That's good, man. Let me ask you something, a question that, as I kind of go a little bit deeper here. What's the number one question that you wish you were asked on these podcasts? What is this thing that you want people in our audience to know about you?
Hmm. Hmm. It's funny when podcasters often will ask that in advance of a podcast. And I always throw it back to them. And I hope that when you think about the mission statement that you read earlier, it will make sense as to why. But the thing that I want most for people in this podcast that are listening to this podcast to know is the thing that's most going to serve them in getting what they want. And so I always throw it back to the podcaster and I say, for your audience, like, why are they here? Why are they listening?
Mm-hmm.
And when you can tell me that, then I can tell you exactly what I want them to know or to know about me, because who gives a shit otherwise about me? Like, I am only relevant in this podcast to the extent at which I serve and make a difference for the people listening. Otherwise, my answer is about me. And it doesn't fulfill me. It doesn't really work. That doesn't create many results anyway. So can you answer that? Why are they here? What is
Yeah,
your sense?
100%. Yeah, man. This audience is to be served through, what I call the four senses of or the four pillars: faith, fitness, fellowship, and finances, and the constructs that we live through our life. We discussed up and down, and the reason this is a kind of a different, maybe off topic episode, just, basically you and I kind of had a small relationship on social media where, I was just attracted to some of the things you said. You sent me back a great
Mm-hmm.
message, and I just said, you know what? This guy just looks like he's going to go in here and he's going to have a deep conversation. We're going to ask some odd questions and kind of just see where this conversation goes, because at the end of the day, too many people come in with an agenda.
Mm,
Kind of like me asking you that question, you would see what your agenda is. And I think you're holding true to who you are.
mm,
The agenda is to serve and to make sure that the conversations I'm having today are present. And something
mm-hmm,
that I don't do well is actually live in the present. I live into the vision of my future of what I'm trying to
mm-hmm,
accomplish. But I think the people that are listening and being served by this episode are going to understand that, there's a lot more to them outside of their own personal agendas. And so,
mm,
when we're developing our faith, our fitness, a lot of people will listen to this for some version of what they think they're going to get out of my fitness. I don't really do fitness on this podcast, unfortunately. We talk a little bit about that. I just think it's quite boring and easy. And I know it's not for everybody, but it's just do the work and usually the results come.
mm,
And there's a
mm,
lot of different small things in between that I think people overcomplicate, as I'm making fun of people who do ice baths because,
mm,
probably they're about 150 pounds overweight and they shouldn't do that first. But,
mm-hmm,
that's another story for something else. It's more or less just basically opening up someone's mind to think another way and to know that,
mm,
maybe the way they perceive themselves, see themselves, or actually interact in the world may not be the way someone else perceives them, sees them, and interacts. As you were mentioning, your being or how you're being is only perceived by the person telling the story about what you're going to do with it. So my
mm,
wife and I can see something and and taste something and have completely different conversations around what happened.
Right.
Literally, I would walk into the house and feel like I'm okay, but yet
Mm,
she's in a bad mood, and now I'm seeing as like the enemy, etc.
mm,
So like being perceptional, that's great. So this is just a good conversation to have us just kind of take a moment and see
mm.
ourselves for who we are or who we're being. And
Yeah.
I just thought that's where this conversation was going to go. And you're actually
Cool.
you're walking right into it, which is great.
So now I can answer your question. So now like the question that I wish you would have asked me, like to play into your question, is like how can a person's faith, fitness, how can you, John Morgan, most help a person with their faith, their fitness, their fellowship, and their finances? Right. And so that's like, that would have been like completely out of left field because it's kind of a mouthful. But
Hmm.
when I ask myself that question, I sit with it. I don't have to try to figure that shit out because I have faith. I have faith that whatever shows up when I listen to that question with my heart, that whatever shows up, that's fucking useful. So I'm gonna let my mouth open and say that. That's how I've learned to make a big difference in a small amount of time. To trust that, to not try to figure that shit out, but just trust it and go. And so I'm gonna do that here. I don't know what's gonna come, but what I'm seeing is between miles 20 and 26 of the marathon that I ran a few weeks ago, which I ran without training. I had run 2 or 3 miles a week on and off over the past year. So I wasn't ready, but I did it. And why did I do it? Because I was and am and continue to be fascinated with how much more we can achieve when we liberate ourselves from ideas that are common ideas like you should stop when it hurts, ideas like running when something hurt means you're going to get an injury, and ideas like injuries are bad. I asked Chat GPT, what is the benefit of injury? There is no benefit of injury. Are you fucking kidding me? Every time I injure my hands on the barbell, they callus and they get thicker, and I become more capable of doing things with my hands. There is benefit to injury. I
Hmm.
could make a mile-long list. And so ideas that are so common that even artificial intelligence can't see beyond them. And and why is that important for me to share with your team, with your community? Because when you look at fitness, not as a context to produce an outcome that's for your physical body, but you look at fitness as a context to develop a capacity to do things that are difficult and hard, suddenly fitness becomes the fucking fusion reactor for your entire life. And so when I go out in my barn and I hit the bag, I'm a big fan of a company called Fight Camp. They're like the boxing version of Peloton, right?
Yep.
I do
I
that
know
four or
that.
5 days a week. You know them. Fucking love it.
I own
Great company.
Rockbox Fitness. It's a fitness franchise. I own two of those. So
Awesome.
they're kickboxing and functional fitness. So I get you.
Same idea. So you get it. So when I go out there and hit that bag and I'm an animal on the leaderboard, it's like when I want to beat everybody on the leaderboard. I want to hit it as hard as I can, as fast as I can, and keep that pace, right? Why? Is it because I'm like got some ego trip about beating people on the leaderboard? No, because I know that if I can do that when my heart's like going to explode, when my breath, and I can't even keep my breath, if I can tell myself to keep going, and what I've done is I've endured. And the word endure etymologically comes from indurare. That's Latin for strengthen within. What I'm doing when I'm enduring, it's not about, oh, I'm getting to some outcome. It's not about, oh, I'm suffering. No, I'm not suffering. There's pain and I'm enjoying it. What I'm doing is I'm cultivating strength in my heart. I'm strengthening my heart, which in old Latin was to strengthen the will. And I walk out of that barn and I walk back into my office, and there are things that I can do and will do that I wouldn't have done if I didn't cultivate that capacity. So I would say for all the guys listening to this, get fucking fit in your physical body because it will raise everything in your life. And don't do it for the outcome like, oh, I'm going to have abs. No, when you finish the workout, you just got strength of will and heart that's going to actually benefit you and your finances and your fellowship and your faith so much more than abs ever could.
Love it. That's great, man.
Thanks for asking.
Thanks for answering.
You're
Um,
welcome.
Love it. This guy, love teeing this guy up. Do you have a tagline? Do you have anything, something that you would go, a quote or motto that you live by?
Yeah, man.
What do you got?
I am creating and my being is primary. I'm love as loving awareness, as loving kindness. I am magic. I am the gathering of pattern and power, and I create as I speak. I am that I live the archetypal energy of the king, and I know that you will do as I command. I know that I may be wrong, and that's okay, for I am my justification. I am mastery of energy change over time. That is, I am the mastery of power, and I am the arbiter of time. In fact, I know that I have all the time there is to do with what I will, and my will shall be the whole of the law.
It's
There's a
pretty
little
powerful.
taste.
That is
Thank you.
pretty powerful. I like having somebody have something powerful to say and respond. Now I'm going to throw the opposite question,
Mm.
and here's let me see if I even wrote this one down. Maybe it's on my podcast. Let's see. As I'll find it here. I got my notes, but it was more or less having like affirmations. Let's see. And how do you feel about that? Are you someone who speaks affirmations into somebody? Do you feel like it's just cheap words that people just aren't willing to take action on? How do you feel about affirmations?
So yes, I feel that affirmations are cheap words. I don't affirm anything, but what I do is I declare every day who I am and who I am being. And that distinction is the distinction that makes the difference. There's been psychological research done on affirmations, and in most cases the research shows that they are not only not productive but counterproductive,
Mm.
because to affirm something is try to convince yourself of something that you believe in your heart isn't true. And what it does by speaking it is actually, with that lack of presence and that lack of forgiveness, what it actually does is it entrenches the counter belief, and you actually feel worse, feel less happy, less beautiful, whatever it is. And so I don't affirm anything. I say it wasn't the affirmation of 1776 that created the United States. It was the Declaration. We weren't trying to convince anybody. This is a decision, man. Heads up. This is starting now, and it is. And it comes from a space of letting go of the old. And so for me, there's a deep process, a spiritual process of real liberation and forgiveness from the counter belief that has to take place before there is a declaration. And that needs to be a declaration, not an affirmation. It needs to be a decision, a statement. And those things I just shared with you are part of the declarations that I speak on a regular basis. I journal them, I speak them aloud, I create myself. That's the conscious inculcation of who I am being, which is a capitalized being, not all uppercase being.
Love that, man. I have yet to find it, but I don't think I need to. I think you crushed it, and I am on the same page. I don't believe you can sit there and just tell yourself like it's like the person who gets hype in the gym and does a set and screams loud and makes a big scene, and
Mm-hmm.
it's wanting someone to look at them or wanting to empower themselves to do something when you just sit on the bench and do it, or just take
Yeah.
action and get it done. So you said it much more eloquently than I did. So very good. Um, let's see.
Well, the best way to teach yourself who you are is to do the thing that's an expression of that. There's no better convincer of identity than an action that comes from such an identity. So for me, speaking can be part of it, but the action that's aligned with that speaking. So if I were being this, then what would I be doing? Cool, do that, then you're being it. So I'm with you.
Cool. The more shadows, or the more you shine, the more shadows you cast.
Mm,
Run with that.
yeah. Yeah. I think in
Yay or
both
nay?
directions. Yay. Fuck yeah. Yeah. The more you shine, the more shadows you cast, the more you shine, the darker the shadow, the longer the shadow, all that stuff is absolutely true. I think of yourself and of others.
Why do you think people feel that way when people are outshining them? Do they feel they have a something to prove? Do they feel inferior? For the most part, when people see somebody doing something great, they have already a negative attention towards that person, and they feel inferior. In my opinion, this is what they feel, or they feel like they can never achieve that, as opposed to saying, "Good for that person, man. That's so cool that they're doing that great thing. It would be cool maybe one day if I can do something like it and be in motion to say I'm inspired. I'm looking up to this person. I'd like to do
Yeah.
more and learn from this person,
Well,
as
I just see
opposed."
their innocence. I see their innocence, man. It's heartbreaking when I shine and somebody else gets triggered by it or annoyed by it. I am I feel heartbreak for the fact that they have a story about themselves as not capable, that they're not consciously aware of, and they are feeling the pain of. They're feeling their sadness. It fucking hurts
Mm,
to believe the lie that I'm not capable of that. And then I'm so unaware that I'm believing that lie, and that I'm even feeling the hurt, that I get a secondary emotional response, which is anger. And then I project that away from me outward as if it's that person. And I look for some flaw in them and try to tear them down. So I'm like 7 orders away from what's actually going on. So to me, that's heartbreaking that's whole mess is there. And that's what I love to help people with.
yeah, I hear you, and I sense it too when I see people doing certain things like that. I just always say, it's like looking at from a scarcity perspective. People are like, "Oh, I got to cut
Hmm.
expenses," and don't get me wrong, you shouldn't be blatantly spending too much. But I always say, just make more money.
Yeah.
Like when I lived on Wall Street and different things happened, I had a talk on Harvard way back when. I think it was May. I actually just shared a piece of it the other day. Um, and I said, if I could lose $100,000 overnight, I could gain $100,000 overnight. You know what I mean? And that was part
Hmm.
of like just being the emotional trauma and the roller coaster of like money coming in and going. And it's having a deep self-worth of who you are and what you can accomplish. And the stories that we tell about ourselves become who we are. It becomes the
Mm.
belief in the sense of what we can do. So when we started the conversation with, you are your own self-worth, or you can never outlive your
Hmm.
own self-worth, it becomes true because that's the story that people paint. How do you
Yeah.
help people unpack that? I think both of us are very like mental magicians, if you will, when it comes down
Yeah.
to like what we do with clients, because we could tell them to do X, Y, and Z in the gym or in business, etc. But if we can't change the way they think or the way they
Mm.
respond or the way they perceive, we got nothing. So how do you
Yeah,
how do
man.
you get into it with
I
them?
well, for that one in particular, it's a Bible study for me. You're gonna love this one. Matthew, oh God, I can't remember the verse right now, but it's the book of Matthew, and you'll know the verse. To those who have more will be given, and
Mm,
to those
mm,
who have not, all will be taken
amen.
away. And so I help people to understand that because it's their way of seeing the world that often gets in the way of their efficacy. It's not always a personal limitation. It's their map of reality that often stops them. And so my explanation for that verse is to those who believe that they have, more will actually be given. And to those who believe that they don't have, those who live in scarcity, all will actually be taken away from them. And when you start to look at that in the world, you're like, holy shit, that's true. There's actually, I don't know if you knew this, in the Wikipedia, you can find there's a thing called the Matthew effect. It's a principle that has been shown to exist in all areas of life, financially, everything. Literally, to those who have, more is that those get more. The people who get the most funding, they get more funding.
That's right.
And it just goes on and on in every area. And so it's true at every level. And it's like, if you look at that from a place of victimhood, oh my gosh, I don't have, so I'm not going to be given. You're not getting it.
Mhm.
You're saying you don't have as a way of believing. If you then start focusing on that you do have, you start with what you actually have, like, well, I have my health, I've got my wife and my kids, and then you start to feel gratitude, and then you realize that everything that you have is imagined. And I say to people, it's like, when do you have money? Do you have when somebody says yes to paying you? Did they have when they paid? Do you have the money when they pay the invoice? Or do you have it when it clears and now it's in funds that you can use? Or do you have to like take it out of that bank and have it as cash? Or do you have to eat it? When do you have it?
Mhm.
So having is actually something that's a decision that you make. And so if that's the case, then play with that. So I have my health, I have my wife, I have my kids, and I have all the money in the world. For money is liquid and it flows in abundance. And I'm telling you right now, when I say that, I fucking have it, dude. I have it the same way as I have this Ohana hat right now. And I'll tell you what, when you have something like that, whether or not you actually have it, more is given.
Love that. That's powerful. And you give me some great sound clips here, so we'll send those your way. I
Awesome,
love it.
buddy.
We'll get you hooked up. So I got two more things. We're closing in on an hour here with this episode, and I have two questions to ask you. What would you tell your 20-year-old self if the advice that you know now? What would be the person in the 20s and 30s that would need the advice that you can give them today in a line or two? Just something that you see that is completely something that's not prevalent when you're in that come up stage. And not to say that my audience is 20 to 30, they're probably 30 or more. I would
Mm.
say the avatar is probably 35. But what would you say to that learning experience that you've got today that you know damn well didn't serve you earlier?
I don't know. I always find these the most challenging questions. And I said, bring any question. And the reason I find them challenging is because I don't wish that anything was different in my past. I value all of the quote unquote wrong turns and struggles as much as I do the right turns, right? So
Well, what
I
would you,
guess I have this like back to the future fear. Like if I were to go back with the almanac, I'm gonna fuck it up. We're gonna end up when like Biff's gonna be in the
no,
high
no, no.
rise.
I hear that, and I'm not saying change anything, but what can you see is, for me, listening to you, have you always had this sense of um
Oh, okay. Now you
inner
reminded me of
peace,
something.
inner
I used to
self,
be more
inner
of a dick and I started to be a nicer, kinder person. So if I could go back, I don't think there'd be any downside of me being less of a dick sooner. So I'd go all the way back to elementary school. Actually, this is the first time I ever saw it. You've given me a good answer that I'll use in every podcast here forward. Like I would go back and I would just show myself how I was unconsciously being a dick because I was afraid that I had to be sarcastic and one up people in order to be safe and loved. And I would I just give myself a hug and I'd be like, look, buddy, you can be kind and you can still have power. So that's what I would change.
I like that. And I don't typically ask the typical podcast questions. Usually, you're the first person who's actually probably got some, random ones that, just say, I just want to see how you're gonna respond. Actually,
Cool,
some
man.
people I
I
have
like
different
it.
ways to go, but the last one is a world beyond the pale. I just saw that on your post. What is that?
Yeah, this is part of that left hand of God talk that I'm going to do tomorrow. And again, whilst journaling, I ask and I listen. You could call it prayer. Like I have my things that I'm writing, but I'm also listening for like I call them downloads. Like I just phrases come to me. I have no idea what they mean. And that was when I was writing. I just wrote the phrase, "I live in a world beyond the pale," and I was like, "That's awkward. That doesn't that mean you're like a criminal or you're like a bad or evil person?" And so then what I do is, and I go and start like trying to learn about. I look at etymology. I've mentioned a few times. Look at the history of words. So I looked at the phrase "beyond the pale" and I found out where it came from. So I'm of Irish descent. My dad's family is all Irish, and I found out that in when the English were ruling in Dublin, I think in like the 1600s, they built a fence around Dublin, and they used these wooden stakes called pales. And inside the fence was, the proper, the English, the civilized, and beyond the fence, beyond the pale, was the uncivilized, the savage, the
Uh,
Celts,
got it.
right? And so it's like, which is actually my descendant. And so for what that represents, I believe that like that download is like it was giving me the confirmation that my orientation right now is not to be somebody who lives within the authority of the structures of society, right? You say I should do this, I should do that, I should use pronouns, I should get vaccinated, all these things. It's like that's there, but I'm beyond the pale.
Hmm.
I'm a savage, Celt, Irish, free person who's creating from love in my own way. So that's an affirmation for me, not an affirmation in the sense I'm speaking. It was a confirmation for me in the download that where I'm living and who I'm being, the world that I'm living in is beyond the pale right now. It's yeah, it's free, it's liberated. I'm creating a different, this is concept of parallel societies. I'm creating a parallel society. I moved to Maui. I've got a small farm here, building community, growing food. We've got chickens. I'm raising my boys in nature. The world's doing what it's doing, and it's not like I'm denying that that's happening. But I'm just going to create my own path. I'm going to do things my way, from love, and create as much beauty as I can.
It's great, man. I love that. And this episode was good. It was just I feel like just a way with words, just a way to see things differently. Right now, today in this world, we're all seeing things through the lens that social media or the media wants us to see them, and it's not always the way. I had this conversation the other day with many people. You have these side talks, and I don't truly believe that the world that we see is the way that it actually is. I believe it's a small, loud person or persons or group of people
Mm,
or minority of, and not minority by the term of black or Spanish or whatever. It's a
ethnicity. Yeah.
small instance of loud people making a
Mm-hmm.
ruckus and getting attention,
Mm-hmm.
and the masses, the majority, the silent majority as they're called, just are walking along and just it's just not really either engaging or they're too scared to stand out. So if you're
Mm,
hearing, maybe you should be more bold. Maybe you
mm,
should think to say something when you see something. And right's not wrong.
mm,
I would say that at this point in time, I think we need a little bit more thought, vision, and thinking about what the future can become. And it takes your own intro version, if you will, or some kind of like knowing who you are in order to stand up for something. They always say, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for everything, right? And I truly
mm.
believe that more than anything today. And so, I just want to say thanks, John Patrick Morgan, to come on this podcast and just share his thoughts. And, I'm sure that we'll keep our communicating with each other on social and maybe do another episode if people have any questions, and we'll see where this goes. But
Cool.
John, where can they follow you? Where can they, engage with you, hire you if they
Yeah.
want to have you do anything, etc.?
Cool, man. I shared my company website, my training company is wearecreating.com. I have my own personal website, johnpatrickmorgan.com. And my personal handle on all platforms, social media, is JPMorganJR. So Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. That's me.
apmorgan.gr. Yeah, and I have that. And I'll share all that in the show notes, y'all. So if you're listening, just engage. Tell us what you thought about this episode. Maybe certain things that we could shoot him his way, and we'll go from there. But I just appreciate you, buddy. You got a lot of cool things going on, and sounds like you're helping the world to be a better place, or at least think better, and you know, uh, rise up and do what they can with what they got.
Thank you,
You
Craig.
guys
Yeah.
always have to feed where you're planted. A lot of people, look too far, and I'm one of those people that forecast the future. But
Mhm.
we got to grow where we are.
Thank you, Craig. I really enjoyed the conversation.